Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia have the same issues in the ring in terms of technique. And they also have those issues for the same exact reason. Let's break this down. All right, so looking at Devin Haney's last fight against Regis Prograis and also Ryan Garcia's last fight against Oscar Duarte, I noticed a couple of themes that have been recurring probably for both of their careers. And the first theme is that I don't feel that like either fighter has truly a world-class jab repertoire. What I mean by that is it's not just good enough to quote unquote have a jab. A good professional fighter has a multitude of jabs and a multitude of ways of putting those different jabs together. So let's break it down super simply. If you're just throwing out one punch, a single jab, that's just a single jab. Now, as soon as you start to do double jab, triple jab, even 4 jabs, you could start to vary what types of jabs and how hard, the intensity. And of course, you could also vary the target area. On top of all that, of course, you should be feinting as well. So you can feint to a specific target and change the target on the way there. You can feint and change up the speed, and you can change up how hard you're actually trying to hit. Not only that, but there's also different ways to hold your fist, right? So you can try to hit with the top part of your fist, like an up jab to their chin. You can hold your fist vertical and do that type of, it's almost more of a wushu jab. There's just so many jabs. It's like we could do a whole video just on the jab alone, and that wouldn't even cover it, because like I said, it's also then once you understand the different variety of jabs, how do you put these together and how do you feint them to set up the rest of those jabs? It's an art unto itself. So my point here is that Devin and Ryan both have okay jabs, but I haven't seen a repertoire, I haven't seen a variety from them. And on top of that, I've seen one bad habit from both of them it's not only a bad habit, it's one of my own personal pet peeves that I find super irritating, which is when guys do it, I guess, to be a little, maybe not showboaty, but kind of as a mild diss to whoever they're sparring or fighting, which is they'll just stick their jab hand out and kind of hold it there and kind of post it like, ha ha ha, I'm holding you at bay, you can't get to me because you can't get past this arm that I've stuck out and I'm holding out here. Now, Ryan definitely did that in his fight with Oscar Duarte, and Devin also did it, but more so to post and then pivot off of Regis Prograis. But they both did do that, and the thing is, I don't know, it's just one of those super amateurish things that people do when they're starting out and they're kind of ignorant, and because it's like a cheap move. It's just very amateurish, and most boxing trainers will yell at you if you do that. Doesn't matter what sort of school of boxing they come from, because they know it's not going to get you anywhere, and it could get you in trouble if you keep practicing doing that, like just extending your jab hand and leaving it out there. So it's a bad habit. And again, both Ryan and Devin did do that and have done that. We'll come back to why later on in a moment after I run through this whole laundry list. So a lack of jab repertoire is something I see in both of them. Second thing I see is not the greatest footwork. Now, have to give Devin slightly higher points for his footwork with Prograis than I do for Ryan, but they're still both in what I feel is a very amateur mode of footwork. So let's look at Ryan first. He's definitely, because he's decided he's a speed demon, he's just going to move in and out really fast. So he's very linear with his footwork, which is fine and which has served him to this point, right? But it's not very sophisticated. Now, Devin did a little more than that, and he demonstrated perfectly sort of the ideal amateur footwork pattern, which one of my amateur coaches described to me as: pretend you're drawing a flower on the ring canvas, where the other fighter is the center of the flower, and you're going in, hitting them, coming back out, moving around laterally, and then going back in. So now you've just drawn a petal, right? Because you moved over at an angle, and you're going back in, you're hitting them, you're coming back out, you're moving laterally around, going back in. So I guess you get the idea, right? So you're just basically you're trying to circle your opponent, going in, coming out, not in a straight line, like describing this little daisy pattern, right? So ideally, that's what you're able to do at the amateur level. And Devin showed that quite nicely versus Regis Prograis. But again, that's kind of amateurish, right? There's and to his credit, Devin also did make some very sort of slick athletic moves in there, but nothing in comparison to, say, a Jersey Joe Walcott or a Willie Pep or Archie Moore or countless other like old school fighters. So that's the second area I'd say that both Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia could work on a little bit, is their jab repertoire and their footwork. Now, thirdly, and this is the biggest point, is actually not what I saw, but what I saw a lack of. So what I didn't see, I don't know that either one of those fighters knows how to fight on the inside. They just never demonstrated that, and certainly didn't in the last fight, either one of them. There's just not much to say there because there's nothing to critique because it's not there, right? But that's an absolutely crucial aspect of any professional fighter's game, because at some point you're going to have to just know how to fight on the inside. Now, there's plenty of examples of who are great inside fighters, like Roberto Duran, of course, Julio Cesar Chavez. The list goes on, but you could certainly just watch footage of either Devin or Ryan, and then just watch footage of one of those fighters I mentioned, or you pick. You'll see a big difference between somebody who knows how to fight on the inside and someone who doesn't. All right, so there's one simple reason why both of these fighters have those lackings, and that is because when they were amateurs, when they were kids, they only ever fought as juniors or youth, what we call the youth division. In other words, they fought in the kiddie pie division to the teenager division. Neither Devin nor Ryan ever fought amateur boxing versus grown men. So let that sink in a little bit. They only ever competed through the youth divisions, which were 3 times 3-minute rounds. Now, interestingly, Ryan fought way more 3-minute round fights than Devin did. Devin only fought maybe five times, like 3x3 round fights. Most of Devin's fights were 3 times 2 minutes. So what you need to know about that type of game, that setup, right, is much faster. It's just, you just have to be a speed demon and play a super fast game of tag and just touch, where you only get to touch the front upper half of someone's body. You don't get to tag them in the back, right? So neither young man ever fought grown men as an amateur. So there's a couple of things, everything I've just mentioned, they never really had to develop, because they're only ever fighting versus somebody who's also a teenager. And I think that any fighter who made that transition from fighting in the youth division as a teenager to then moving up and fighting in the grown man division will tell you there is a transition and there is a shift, and you absolutely have to recommit yourself to the sport, because it's a whole new world and it's much tougher. And do you want to do this? You have to recommit to yourself and to the sport. So I can speak on that in terms of in terms of judo, but not boxing. In judo, I fought as a kid, from 10 onward and upward. But at the age of 15, they allowed us to compete in the adult division as well as our own teenage division or junior division at that time. So the first year I did that, I doubled up, right? I fought in the kids division, and then I also fought in the adults division. But it was a rude awakening, right? Because it just shifts everything. Adults are coming at you much harder than other kids are, and they're way more serious and way, in a sense, meaner than other kids. So that was a wake up call for me. I can remember I had a fight versus a woman who was, I think, 30 at the time, and I'm 15, and I'm stepping out there thinking, oh my God, you are so old. You are twice as old as me. You're 30 years old. That's so old. And of course, she just kind of looked at me like, I think she could tell, I had the big eyes, and she was smiling while we were fighting, because I guess it was kind of tickled her that she knew that this was my first time fighting in the adult division. But my point is, it is a big step up when you go from fighting in the kids division to fighting in the grown adult division, and it's not necessarily a comfortable transition. Now, I would imagine that for young men fighting in the adult male division, making that transition is probably potentially even tougher than it is for females, just because males go through that significant growth spurt, or not, just depending on when it's timed for them. So for a young man who doesn't have any man strength yet, that's going to be pretty rough to get in the ring with a man who's 25 or older and has developed his musculature as well as his mindset. So I think that part of the game was just never developed by Devin nor by Ryan, just because they skipped out on that. They went straight from being these hotshot juniors to turning pro as teenagers. Now, I mean, kudos to them and their team, because obviously if I had half their money, I could burn all mine. But, it's just, at this point, it's almost, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's going to be incredibly difficult for anybody to convince them that they need to sort of go back to square one and work on all these attributes that I just mentioned. Because it's a tedious procedure. It's a lot of drilling. And that's something that would have happened had they decided they were going to fight in the adult men's division, because they would have had no choice. They would have had to develop a much better jab repertoire. They would have had to develop much better footwork, and they definitely would have had to learn how to fight on the inside in order to deal with other adult men who are coming with bad intentions and have man strength. And here's the last thing that's could be super telling, which is, of course, if you're that 17-year-old trying to step in there with a 25, 28-year-old in some, national level amateur tournament, that's going to be tough. And you're going to have to be mentally tough and mentally resilient in order to potentially take some L's as you move from being 17 to 18 and 19. You might have to take some L's. They might be hard L's, right? You might get stopped. But you got to get over that hump in order to keep going forward, right? In the senior division as an amateur. So both Ryan and Devin kind of skipped that whole phase and turned pro, and then were, let's be fair, they were brought along to a certain extent because both of them had people investing in them time-wise as well as financially. In order to bring both Devin and Ryan along, they had to be carefully matched at the beginning of their career, because not only is this their pro debut, this is their finishing off their amateur career. This is the first time they're getting in there with grown adult men. So I'm not sure what their mindset is about that whole aspect of jumping over the whole fighting in the senior male division thing and having to take your lumps and having to reconcile with yourself whether you still want to do that or not. I guess why should they consider that something lacking, because they're doing so well as professionals, right? But it's that mindset. Are they willing to sort of go back and learn some of the things that they stepped over because they turned pro as a teenager, not as a grown man, right? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen. Also, because for any trainer who takes on either Devin or Ryan, it's probably the best payday they're ever going to get. They may not want to, shake their finger at this goose that's going to lay the golden egg for them, right? 10% of whatever their purse is certainly much better than probably the rest of their whole stable's bringing in. So I mean, no trainer's going to turn either one of these guys away, but by the same token, it would take a real special trainer to be able to grab either one of these fellows by the collar and say, look, we're going to do this and you need to learn this, and we got to go back to square one, and we have to do these tedious drills, and you better show up and you better do these things. I don't know if that can happen. So there's just one other point I wanted to bring up about Ryan's last fight. And again, it kind of shows me that, unfortunately for him, and I don't know what went on with camp with Derek James, but in my opinion, Ryan actually reverted to some bad amateur habits during that fight with Oscar Duarte. And one of those was, as some ignorant boxing journalists would say, oh, he did a shoulder roll. No, he did not do a shoulder roll. That is not a shoulder roll, the thing he was doing. He did what is just a super bad habit called leaning away. So if the opponent is right in front of you at 12 o'clock, what Ryan was doing wasn't a shoulder roll. Shoulder roll, you're literally turning your shoulders, but your eyeballs are still pointing straight forward at 12. So Ryan was turning all the way away. He turned all the way to, if that's 12 o'clock straight ahead and 6 o'clock straight behind me, he was turning to around 4 o'clock. And then he was bending over. So now he's exposed the back of his head to Oscar. And then, of course, Oscar's starting to throw the punch. So as Ryan turns away and leans down, Oscar's going to wind up hitting him on the back of the head. So then what does Ryan do? He complains to the ref, oh, he's hitting me on the back of the head. But it's like, that's one of the worst habits ever, to turn all the way away like that. And then on top of that, to bend down at the waist. That's another thing that no matter what, in Gleason's gym, no matter who your trainer was, I'm talking about the old 75 Front Street Gleason's gym, you would have gotten yelled at by any trainer in Gleason's gym. Now, the funny thing there is that back in those days, like, I guess, 90s, early 2000s, there was lots of, like, in-house rivalries, right, amongst the trainers. But they were all very good at what they taught. But they would definitely make fun of each other. Oh, look how he's teaching that uppercut. Look how he shows the left hook. Like, oh, what is that? You know, I'm not suggesting anybody start critiquing a boxing trainer's method of teaching. That you gotta earn the right to kind of joke around about how somebody teaches something. You better be a pretty good trainer yourself before you start joking around about that stuff. But in any case, there's just nobody that would ever say that turning away to 4 o'clock and bending over is a boxing move. It's not a boxing move. First off, turning away is not a boxing move, and then on top of that, bending down like that makes it even worse. You're gonna get yelled at just because, obviously, just by even turning away to 4 o'clock, you're in no position to return a shot. You're way out of position, and then by bending down like that, you're exposing back your head, and that makes it even worse. And you will get hit in the back of the head, and no trainer wants to see their fighter put themselves in a crappy position like that, so that you're gonna get yelled at. So I'm not sure why Ryan did those things. I don't know if he had hard enough sparring, or if he was thoroughly prepared. It baffles me as to why he would revert to doing a move like that, which is not even really a move. It's a super bad habit that I guess you just, in just not knowing what else to do, maybe you revert to that. Not sure. But the one other thing I wanted to point out, and I did mention the footwork, but in the sort of later rounds of both Devin in his fight versus Prograis, and in Garcia's fight versus Duarte, both of them started kind of doing that lateral run around the ring move a little bit. Devin to a lesser extent than Ryan. But again, that's an old amateur thing, that when you figure you're winning on points and you got the fight, then sometimes fighters will just start moving around the perimeter like that just to kill the clock, as they say. And it's a little showboaty when you're an amateur. It's really like kind of lame to do that when you're a pro. But you will see a lot of young amateur guys do that, and pretty much kind of like taunt their opponent, like ha ha ha, and just like run around the perimeter. I'm winning on points, so ha ha ha, and it's just corny. It's certainly not appropriate at the pro level, and definitely not at pro pay-per-view level, or whatever, pro televised level. That's just, it's not called for.
And again, I don't know what has these guys, I don't know what's running through their head when they do these things. So it's hard for me to point to a cause. But overall, I think this is, overall, for me, for sure, this is why I don't like watching current day boxing. Just because, as my mom used to say, hey, garbage in, garbage out. You watch garbage, you're going to produce garbage. And I'm actually a firm believer in that, because if you watch somebody do a sport with bad habits, you're reinforcing that in your brain, right? Like, I don't want to have bad habits, so why would I watch somebody perform with bad habits? It's going to get imprinted up here, and then maybe that's what's going to come out of me. I prefer to watch examples of, in this case, boxers that I would love to emulate. Like, as I mentioned before, all those fight films you got on YouTube that are in black and white. I think those are super valuable, and we can all learn from masters of their craft. But so far, all props to them for their huge success, but neither Devin nor Ryan, for me, are masterful boxers or fighters at this point. Simply because they kind of glossed over that whole learning process and didn't then sit down with their camp and say, hey, you know what? I know I stepped over this, so can we go back and go over this, and can you teach me this? Neither one of these guys have done that, and given their success, maybe they don't feel like they need to, and then given their success, monetary-wise, what trainer is going to tell them, look, buddy, you better do this? And then what? And then the kid's out the door the next day because they're like, screw you. I don't want to do your tedious stuff. I'm out of here. I got someone else that'll train me. Of course you do, because 10% of your purse is like pretty good money, even 5%. So there you have it. That's why that's my point with Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia, is the fact that neither one of them fought grown men as amateurs and then went straight from being a junior fighter to a professional fighter. I think that's why they both have certain holes in their game. What do you think? Tell me in the comments below. Thank you for listening.